We are in Hanoi City, one of the most Lithuanian areas in America. More than 10% of the population here is of Lithuanian roots. And I am talking with Elaine Luschas of Luschas family that keeps the Lithuanian flame alive here. So what is the history of Hanoi City? Why there are so many Lithuanians here?
The Lithuanians came to work in the mines. My grandfather was born in 1864 in Lithuania. He came here to work in the mines. He was one of the helpers of the building of the St. Joseph's Lithuanian Church, which opened in 1888. In fact, he was the first custodian of the church. Unfortunately, I never met my grandfather. He died in 1927 because of the dust from the mines, miner's asthma really. And I never met my grandmother. She died in 1935. She came to the United States in 1899. On the papers it says as a servant. And she went to her sisters in Gilberton, another mining coal patch outside of Monte City, and then made her way to Monte City and worked in a bar room as a barmaid. Met my grandfather, they got married, and their first child was born in 1903. And eventually she became a nun in the Sisters of St. Francis, Providence of God. And the reason she did that is because the sisters had the home next to them on Spruce Street to live in until the convent was built. Because Father Chesna, who was the pastor from Lithuania, was very intent on the Lithuanian language and traditions to be carried on. So he built that school and he had those sisters come here. They're from Pittsburgh. That was a good 4.5 hours from Hanoi City. And then she just had her calling because she just loved what she saw in these sisters.
All of your grandparents came from Lithuania in the 19th century.
Yes.
So what makes you to still continue going the Lithuanian way? Even your daughter has learned Lithuanian language. So how comes?
Because my mother carried on traditions of Lithuania. The two most special holidays are Christmas and Easter, and all those traditions during those holidays are carried on. And I think a lot of the traditions that I follow came from Sister Roberta. That was my aunt, and she would make sure that I knew what the marguche eggs were. We still have kuchos for Christmas. She always was sending little bits and pieces of the Lithuanian culture to me. And when we went to visit her in Pittsburgh many times, she would take us to the Lithuanian room at the convent and make sure that she was showing me all these different things of the Lithuanian following. It just was part of my being. And my husband and I are both Lithuanian. We went to the Lithuanian Catholic Elementary School, St. Joseph's. In fact, my area that I grew up in was so Lithuanian. All I had to do was go through the alleyway, turn right, go a few feet, and there was the school. Go to my left, the convent was on South Street, and the church, it was just all Lithuanian around me.
Unfortunately, the school has been since demolished. Luckily, the church still survives, while the Diocese of Allentown decided to remove the ethnic churches, and so there is no officially Lithuanian churches anymore here in the area. In Hanoi City, they decided out of all the churches to keep exactly the Lithuanian one, but it was remodeled a little bit, yes. And so how does the church today differs from the Lithuanian church that you went to, even though it's the same building?
The present priest brought different articles from each church to bring those different backgrounds together. There were Stations of the Cross that were carved from the German church brought in. There were different items from the Italian church, the Polish church, the Irish church, the Slovak church. All these things were brought together. But the best thing that they did was the mural that was behind the main altar was changed so that the saints from each of these churches were encompassed in this mural. St. Canicus, St. Casimir, Sacred Heart, St. Mary's, St. Joseph, and they also put in anticipation that Mother Teresa would become a saint, and she did. So it was a wonderful way of bringing all those churches together. And I think the feelings that the people have had in Monte City about the closing of those other churches have healed, and they're all together now and happy. And the reason that Mother Teresa came to Monte City in 1995 was the pastor, Monsignor Wassel, encouraged it. The school was closed already, so the sisters were given the Lithuanian nuns convent to work through. So she came to visit and see what was going on in Monte City. And then getting back to your question about my daughter and her interest in the language, because of following these customs of kuchos, we make sure we have the 12 different things at Christmas Eve. We look for different recipes that are Lithuanian to make sure we're doing everything right. And they just have that in their blood. And she wanted to, of course, these things are written in Lithuanian sometimes, and I couldn't help. So she wanted to learn the language on her own. So she entered a program, the BALSI program, and went to Bloomington, Indiana, to Indiana University, and took a 6-week intense Lithuanian program. But you have to be immersed into the language. And I can't help her, unfortunately, because when we went to the Lithuanian grade school, my husband and I, the first thing we learned was the Lithuanian national anthem. But after that, the textbooks that they used to use in this school, my brother is 12 years older than me, and I have his textbooks. They were teaching them the Lithuanian language, but we did not have the Lithuanian school that the second waivers had.
It's still very impressive that you continue Lithuanian traditions after your family lives in America for more than 120 years. And Mahanoi city has quite many Lithuanian places with Lithuanian history. Here, for example, this bank was established by a Lithuanian priest. Mm-hmm. And how it comes that the priest decided to establish a bank?
I believe because of building the church, and they did not want to have a debt, that, you know, he was smart enough to start a bank. And he had, of course, Lithuanians on the board, and I believe that helped in the construction and helping to build the church and the convent and the school.
And from what I heard, it was also so that ethnic Lithuanians, like immigrants, were not so easily accepted into American banks, and mm-hmm. so it was some kind of social help for poor Lithuanians who would not get loans in American banks, so they had their own Lithuanian bank. And another one of these major institutions here was newspaper Saulė. By some accounts, it was at one time the largest Lithuanian language newspaper in the world, as it was published already by the time Lithuanian language was still banned in Lithuania itself, that is before 1904. So what could you tell us about the Saulė newspaper?
From my knowledge, started in 1888. It started in the basement of the home that was built by the Buczkowski family. Dominic Buczkowski was the founder. And he didn't print it there, he had it printed somewhere else. Soon after that, he built a property that was just as large as the home on Spruce Street and accommodated the office for the Saulė, and that was the business part of that building. And it became too small, and then he built a larger building on South Street Alley, about 2 blocks up from that, 3-story building. And even the structure of that building, some of the artistry of the windows have the carved kind of wood that they have in the Lithuanian villages. Unfortunately, it stopped printing in 1959. Not only did he print a newspaper, he printed books that he wanted the Lithuanian people to know about, Tom Sawyer, so that they would be familiar with the story. And he was educating them too of knowing what was going on in Lithuania. When my aunt, the sister Berta, came to visit when I was very small, she had to be accompanied by somebody. She could not travel and visit relatives on her own. And sometimes I was the chosen one. And when she would visit, she would speak in Lithuanian to her relatives. But she was always interested in this one relative who received newspapers from Saulė, and she would read them until she got enough information. And also I remember she had a Victrola, the kind that you crank. And we had the 78 records, and Monte City had the Monte City Lithuanian Orchestra. And she would play that. Then they would exchange ideas about how to use different herbs and different things like that for healing. As a child, I looked at it as something not secretive, but maybe magical that they were talking about.
Indeed, Saulė is interesting for us today because it's written in that old Lithuanian language that still includes many Polish loan words, and the orthography is different. And that is because it was the people who published it. They emigrated from Lithuania before Lithuania became independent in 1918 and before the modern Lithuanian language standard was set up. And so even after Lithuania became independent, even after Lithuania became occupied again in 1940, orthography tradition and language tradition here remained as it was from the times before World War I. Of course, over time, more and more people started speaking English, and so in 1959, the Lithuanian newspaper Saulė stopped its publication. In 2017, when we first visited this area, we still saw the original building of Saulė newspaper. Unfortunately, it was recently demolished, but still many Lithuanian heritage sites survive in the area. It is a unique area where in many towns more than 10% or even more than 15% of the inhabitants are of Lithuanian descent. And many of the buildings here are related to the Lithuanian history, and many firsts for Lithuania happened in this area, like first Lithuanian language novel or the first Lithuanian brass bands in the world. So if you would ever visit this area, I encourage you to read map.lithuania.com and see exactly the locations where these Lithuanian sites are. And if you are interested in more stories from the most Lithuanian places of America and beyond, I suggest you to follow this YouTube channel.